For the next 2 hours, I'm unleashing the most advanced hacking course ever created. The course is designed to transform you from zero to expert in as little time as possible, which means if you're just a beginner, it's going to be a fast but incredible ride. Today, this is the #1 top vulnerability reported to government, financial services, telecoms, retail and e-commerce, transportation, media and entertainment, computer software, internet and online services, travel and hospitality. Basically, every single industry on the face of the earth suffers daily from this exact security problem that you're now going to learn. But not only are you going to learn it, you have the chance to completely master what 99% of the best educated, best trained software engineers repeatedly fail to get right. This is information that companies pay me top dollar to know, government agencies wanted to recruit me for, and I spent several years absolutely perfecting this craft and consolidating it into this course that's been very, very successful over the years, but that also required me to lock it away from public eyes. But here's the good news. I'm no longer chained by the corporate world anymore to keep silent, and so I'm releasing these signature hacking videos, the best of the best, completely for free to you at a time when this is absolutely the hottest security problem on the market. You're gonna unlock both the attacker and defender skill sets, complete with cringy nerd humor to top it off. But don't let that fool you. I needed to dress the wolf in sheep's clothing for corporate friendliness and, well, legal reasons. These are some very dangerous skills that can cause a lot of damage in the wrong hands, which is why most companies really don't want you to know this information. The only thing I ask in return is that you like this video and subscribe to my channel, because there is something even more massive coming up that you don't want to miss. This course is just the very beginning of an emerging new world that's about to change our lives forever. And trust me, you don't want to be without these skills. So what do you say? Are you ready to take a dive deep into the digital elite world of hacking? Then let's have some fun and get started down this cyber path of excellence. Welcome to the ultimate XSS mastery course. I'm going to show you the most popular way to hack a website where you can steal private information, hijack accounts, take over web pages, and other illegal things to get you thrown in jail. Hold on, this isn't for legal activity, it's for educational purposes only. Notice the lights are on, I'm not wearing a hoodie, and I don't even have a Matrix themed terminal. So there's no crime going on here. You have to promise me you'll use this information for good and not evil. So when you're ready, this is the recipe for the basics of cross-site scripting. Hello world, I'm Jesse from Chef Secure. Cross-site scripting, or XSS, is a security vulnerability in web applications that allows evil hackers to inject their own code inside a web page. Yep, that's bad. With the power of scripting, cybercriminals can use your web applications to steal passwords, install malware, or worse. The ingredients for this recipe are HTML tags, JavaScript functions, JavaScript numbers, and JavaScript strings. The first step in cross-site scripting is to inject a script element into a web page. Now, web pages are built using HTML, which uses tags to create elements. Yep, there are a lot of them. Let's get started. Go to the script injection example for this recipe below and pause the video when you need to so you can follow along and gain hands-on experience rather than just sitting there all awkwardly watching me do everything by myself. You can see that when you type something in and click the update button, it gets rendered on the page. So if you add more HTML, what do you think would happen? Open an HTML tag using less than and greater than characters surrounding an element name like P for paragraph. Then add some content, and then add a closing tag after that, which is just the same as an opening tag, only there's a slash in front of the element name. Then click the update button. You see that instead of writing text, you actually change the HTML of the web page by adding a new paragraph element. While simple, this is very, very powerful because JavaScript controls the web page. And if you can inject a script element instead, you now control exactly what happens in the browser. And this is how XSS works. So go ahead and inject script tags this time. Start with your opening script tag, followed by your closing script tag, Now for the content that goes inside, this, my friends, is where we enter the f***ed up world of JavaScript. Wonderful world of JavaScript. JavaScript can be confusing at times, but what it does well, it does exceptionally well, like letting you hack websites or making them more interactive. Performing actions in JavaScript is like any other programming language where you just call functions. You can do this by typing the name followed by parentheses. And anything that goes inside the parentheses gets passed as data or arguments that the function can use. And like other programming languages, you can set values using an equal sign. Right now, try calling the alert function within your script tags. So type in alert followed by parentheses, then click the update button and watch your script execute. Because you see this alert pop up, it means your script was injected into the page successfully and ran due to an XSS vulnerability. While you're at it, get some practice with arguments as well. So type in the number 1 to the alert function, click the update button, and you'll see it alert 1. Or pass in text surrounded by either single or double quotes to make a string, and you can alert something you really love. I'm going to alert food, because I love food. I'm always thinking about, wait a second, chef secure? Alerting is the most common function used by both cybercriminals and security researchers alike to find vulnerabilities in websites. Now keep in mind that the alert function is just a placeholder showing that a script can be injected. And once a vulnerability is found, an attacker can easily replace this with a malicious exploit that causes much more damage. Consider something simple. Instead of alerting in our example, let's just destroy the whole web page by removing all the HTML. In JavaScript, document.documentElement.innerHTML contains all the HTML of the web page. So just change it by setting it equal to an empty string. In our example, if we type that in, document.documentElement.innerHTML equals empty string, click the update button, and it's gone. I'm going to show you more about how cybercriminals can exploit websites in a later recipe, but if you're just testing for vulnerabilities, an alert is really all you need most of the time. So from here, what you really need is just to be creative and explore so you can find more vulnerabilities. Say you need to type in something in a website such as a username or a status update. There's always a chance that it could contain an XSS vulnerability, so it's worth a shot. Of course, websites do have protections against XSS, some of them even built directly into the frameworks on which they're built. But despite this, and despite the frameworks being around for several years, the number of XSS vulnerabilities is still rising like crazy, and that's because writing secure, resilient code can be quite tricky at times. And even with automatic protection, you can still screw things up pretty badly. Trust me. I've done it more than once. And I'll do it again, I promise. But that's the point of having defense in depth, which I will teach you as we go along in this course. But mistakes happen, so let's look on the bright side. At least there are plenty of vulnerabilities to find and fix before cybercriminals can come and hack your application. Wait, that's not comforting at all. But that's all the time I have for now. Goodbye, friends.
This is the first challenge in the hacking websites with cross-site scripting recipe. Create an XSS payload. All right, this one's very, very simple. The first step in finding XSS vulnerabilities is to create a payload. And that's just a block of code using JavaScript that informs you whether or not your attack was successful. The most common way to do this is simply to call the alert function. So the goal of this challenge is just that, call the alert function. So you're going to finish the attack right here. It's already set up for you. Easy peasy. You already have the script tag injected right here. And you just need to type in the JavaScript code right here. So if you recall from the recipe, to call the alert function, we just type in alert and then type in left and right parentheses. Click run code. And you see at the top of the page, the alert executed, which means the attack was successful. This web page has a vulnerability where it'll run any JavaScript code we give it. So we'll click OK, And then we see that the challenge was passed successfully. And that was way, way, way too easy. Do not be worried. This course is going to get much, much more advanced. You're going to learn some very, very cool stuff with XSS. And so this is just to get everybody on the same page if you're not familiar with cross-site scripting or if you're not familiar with JavaScript. Everybody is going to become the master of this. Let's move on to the next challenge. So challenge number 2 is inject HTML with XSS. XSS attacks are more than just JavaScript code. You also need to know the basics of HTML. If you recall from the recipe, HTML tags are used to create elements on a web page. And sometimes injecting harmless HTML can lead to discovering XSS vulnerabilities, especially when your payload is blocked by the server. So this is getting into filter bypassing a little bit, which we're going to cover in much, much more detail later on in the course. So the goal here is simply inject an extra paragraph element. We have this form to fill out to create a custom greeting card. So I am just going to fill this out. Let's take the suggestions already. I'm going to do happy birthday, but feel free to put in anything you want. Create your own custom greeting card that you want to send to somebody. All right, I'm going to do happy birthday. I'm going to put this image that I found earlier, and then I'm going to send it to you. Happy birthday to you from me, Jesse. Click create card when you fill out the form. It says happy birthday. It has the image that you linked to in there. And it says, hi, you. May you have a very special day. Best wishes, Jesse. You can tell my heart was really in that one. But anyway, we need to find HTML injection in here. We're going to do this noob versus pro style. The noob will simply just try to put in a paragraph here. Let's say hello. And then click create card, but we're going to do it the pro style. So what we want to do in order to plan this out better, here are the secrets of the experts that I'm going to share with you. You don't have to just do one at a time. All right. You can do all of them. So I'm just going to copy this over. And here's another tip. Make the content useful for you as the attacker. So first, what I'm going to say is title. Let's call it title injection. And then let's do one here. It's probably going to break the image, but that's okay. Image injection. And I'll paste it here. Let's do to injection. And then from will be from injection. That way, if we see an extra paragraph show up on this web page down here, we're going to know exactly what input was vulnerable. And then we don't have to guess where it came from, and we can launch our attack from there. So click create card, and we see the challenge was successful, but let's go and check it out in more detail. So you see happy birthday, and you have the P tag with title injection in there, which means this is secure. It's not the title that was vulnerable because the HTML is being properly handled and escaped. If you're a software developer or you're just interested in how this gets fixed by web developers, we're going to go over that in great detail later on in the course. But right now, just know that when we see this, it means the attack was not successful because the website protected against it. So the image loaded, and then it says, hi, you. But right after that, we have a new paragraph that was injected. It says to injection. So we know, again, exactly where that injection came from, and it was from this to field. And let's continue on just to see if there's anything else. May you have a very special day. Best wishes from Jesse. And then our failed from injection. Okay, because again, the website protected from this. Now, you don't see anything for the image. So I'm going to just show you what's going on here. I'm going to right click and then select the inspect option. And we can see that our script did not get injected in here. It was completely filtered out. There is nothing in here. That's another protection that websites can do, where it just completely removes your payload. And we're going to go into that again later in the course. So like I said, you're going to be a complete master of XSS by the time this course is complete. But right now, let's just make sure we have the fundamentals expertly handled. You know everything in detail, in great depth. So we're going to build upon this knowledge and do some incredibly awesome things. Let's move on. Next challenge. Your first XSS attack. Now, since you already know how to create JavaScript payloads and inject HTML, it's time to put both of those together and create a full XSS attack on your own. So the goal here is to inject a full XSS payload to call the alert function. So what we're going to do here is fill out this form. It's to create a story. So this is like Mad Libs, if you know what that is. Basically, you come up with random words that fit the topic and it creates a story based on what you filled in. It's how old people used to have fun before cell phones. So just fill in the blanks with anything. Now, I can't put anything too colorful in here, otherwise I'll get kicked off of YouTube, but feel free to add some flair of your own. My name is Jesse. Action performed, I'm gonna just say 8. I ate something. 5, number 5. Things, chickens. All right, and then dangerous things is the last one. I will put infected needles. So click create story and let's see what happens. So the top story from today's news. In today's top story, a national hero by the name of Jesse ate 5 chickens. Not even infected needles could stop. Wow, I wish I could get 8 like that. It would be a dream come true. Hey, that's today's news. This is better news than most news outlets today. Post in the comments. I want to see what you wrote. We gotta attack this. We have a goal here. That's right. We're gonna inject a full XSS payload to call the alert function. So remember, we're gonna do this the smart way, where we can just do everything all at once without having to do one by one. Click create story, change another one, click create story. All right. This is how the pro hackers do it. So what I'm going to do here is call script and alert, close script. Now, like I said, we're going to do it the pro way. If there's just an alert that pops up after we inject everything, we're not going to know where it came from. So we can alert something unique. Like we can alert the string name if we wanted to do it like that. Or we can just simplify it and just put in a number. So we know name is number 1. I'm going to copy this, paste it here. Alert 2, number, I'm going to put alert 3, chickens for things. This is going to be alert 4, and then dangerous things will be alert 5. So after we input all those, I'm going to click create story and let's see what happens. All right, there is an alert that came up on the top of the page and it is 5. The dangerous things is in fact what lets hackers into this website. Congratulations, you passed the challenge by injecting your full XSS payload into the page. All right, wonderful. So we're going to move on to the next recipe and see what damage we can do next.
Hello world, I'm Jesse from Chef Secure. In the last recipe, you learned the most basic of XSS attacks, injecting script tags. This only works in the most basic scenarios and may not work even when a web page is still vulnerable. So in this recipe, I'm gonna show you how to unbasicify your payload. The ingredients for this recipe are HTML attributes, HTML tags, and JavaScript functions. How does your browser know where to find images to load? HTML attributes. What about where links go? HTML attributes. How about CSS styles? HTML attributes, mostly. HTML attributes modify or give data to an HTML tag, but sometimes you can't trust this data because it comes from people like you. Go to the attribute breakout example for this recipe below. On the bottom, there's the word hover. So if you hover your cursor over it, you'll see something that says change me. So let's try typing something in the input box. Click the update button and then hover again. You'll see that it changed. So right click on hover, select the inspect option. Within the opening tag of this H1 element, you see 2 attributes, class and title. The title attribute of the H1 element was updated with our input. You see how the attributes are set using a name, an equal sign, and a quoted value? This is how you set attributes. These values can actually be single quoted, double quoted, or even unquoted, as long as there aren't any space characters, so that your browser knows where the value ends and a new attribute begins. Hey, listen, this is something very important. To put it another way, as an attacker, this means you can break out of attributes using either single quotes, double quotes, or space characters depending on how the attribute is set. Keep this in mind for later. So what happens when we try injecting our basic payload from last recipe? See for yourself. Type in the basic payload from last recipe using your opening script tag, an alert, and then a closing script tag. Click the update button and Absolutely nothing happens. We need to rethink our payload so it works in both the normal content part of elements as well as within attributes. Here we go. Start off with a closing quote to break out of the attribute. Now, where are we? Inside the tag still. So we need to close out that tag with a greater than symbol. Now you already know what to do here. Just type in your basic script with an alert and close your script tag. Click the update button and there you go. Since you closed the tag early, there are still some characters left over, but it doesn't really matter since you got your script to execute. Now for extra challenge, feel free to find a way to hide these remaining characters so that if this were a real attack, it wouldn't be looking so sketchy right now. Also, as I said earlier, this can work whether you're injecting into attributes like we just did or into the content of HTML elements. So if you'd like to, feel free to go back to the example from the last recipe and try it out there if you don't believe me or you think I'm a liar. Hey, I'm gonna break your payload again. Go to the Textarea breakout example for this recipe below and try out your new payload. We're now injecting inside a text area, which is just a large area where text goes. Who'd have thunk? In web development, we use text areas all over the place to allow multi-line input, such as emails or status updates. But elements like text areas are unique in that they handle content differently than other elements. See for yourself, type in your new payload. Start with a double quote, followed by a greater than symbol. Then enter your basic payload with script, alert, close script, click the update button, and it doesn't work. So I want you to fix this payload now using the same thought process you did when breaking out of attributes earlier. Ready? Go. Did you get it? All you gotta do is close out the text area tag. So close text area, followed by script, alert, close script, click the update button, and you have a successful attack. There's going to be a remaining closing text area tag after this, but your lazy browser doesn't care, so neither do attackers.
This is XSS attacks in user profiles. Many times, basic script injection attacks won't be enough to find critical XSS vulnerabilities. Whoa, hold on there. The challenges here are exclusive to pro-level course members on chefsecure.com, where you'll really love the advanced hacking challenges as they get quite difficult and interesting. My absolute favorite is stealing user logins with XSS, which I definitely cannot show on YouTube, but as a pro member, you'll get the full uncensored experience. And if you need extra help, I'll even walk you through the challenges step by step, sharing every XSS hacking secret I know. So click the link below to unlock full access and join the elite few. The rest of the videos, like I said, are totally free, so don't forget to subscribe if you're enjoying the course so far. The next hack begins now.
Hey, let's look at some bad URLs. Not those bad URLs, the kind used for exploiting. The kind used for penetration to cross-site scripting URLs. Hello world, I'm Jesse from Chef Secure, and I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is you're attacking HTML attributes again, but the bad news, I'm HTML escaping your input, so your payload's not going to work. The ingredients for this recipe are HTML attributes, HTML tags, JavaScript functions, and URL schemes. Some attributes are specifically designed for URLs. Hrefs and anchor tags take in URLs to create links, and sources and iframes take in URLs to embed web pages. Go to the JavaScript URLs example for this recipe below. Type anything into the input box and click update just so we can see what's going on. Right-click and inspect the updated element. And you can see that your input is being used in both the href attribute and in the h1 content for this link. Go ahead and try injecting the payload from last recipe to break out of the attribute and inject a script tag. We'll start with a double quote followed by a right angle bracket, then a script tag, alert, then close script tag. Click the update button. It didn't work this time, so let's inspect the element to find out what's going on. As you can see, it's being HTML escaped, so the browser doesn't treat your code as code. Instead, it's just text. So this eliminates breaking out of attributes and injecting script tags from our attack. So instead, we're gonna attack the URL directly. But before we do that, what exactly is a URL? The technical definition of a URL is it starts with a scheme, followed by a colon, followed by a bunch of other stuff. Normally on the web, we use HTTP or HTTPS schemes, but just linking to another web page isn't gonna help us out for an attack, so let's not be boring. What if there was a scheme we could use specifically to launch XSS attacks? Think of something completely and totally crazy like a JavaScript scheme that can allow us to inject malicious script whenever we want it, thereby compromising the security of every website that doesn't specifically defend against this. But that would be too easy, like seriously. Okay, here we go. Type in JavaScript alert parentheses. Then let's click the update button. And now we're gonna click this link. Yeah, it's actually a thing. The JavaScript scheme can be used in redirects or in source attributes like iframes and embeds, as well as href attributes like in anchor elements like we just saw. Again, remember the alert is simply a convention used to show there's a vulnerability on the web page, but it can easily be replaced by code that could ultimately end up causing harm, much like those other URLs you've been visiting. The next type of URL that can lead to XSS is probably something you're already using. I'm talking about third-party scripts. You know, where you pull a script from another web page and run it on your own? That sounds a lot like cross-site scripting. I'm not gonna tell you don't use third-party scripts because that would be stupid and unreasonable of me. And I'm not an unreasonable man. But what I am gonna tell you is to be careful of who you trust. And even when you do have trust, know that security breaches can happen where servers can get compromised and code can be changed. I'll show you how to protect yourself from this in a later recipe, but if you already know right now you have some shady scripts that you're trusting, go ahead and look at them just to make sure they're not doing anything they shouldn't. Finally, this recipe would not be complete without discussing the data scheme. It can look something like this, or sometimes encoded with base64 like this. Data schemes used to work for XSS attacks, but modern browsers have fixed this with updates. This means that any script run from a data scheme is not XSS because it's completely isolated and the script is not run in the context of the web page. But if you're forced to support older insecure versions of browsers that make your website vulnerable to attacks, then I'm sorry, but you're beyond help. Well, that's the end of this recipe. No, wait. Defending against the data scheme is the same as with defending against the JavaScript scheme, and I'll walk you through exactly how to do this in a later recipe. If someone ever tells you they don't need to worry about cross-site scripting because they have automatic HTML escaping, be a pal and share a bad URL or two with them. We're working with filters today. Not these filters. Hello world, I'm Jesse from Chef Secure. XSS filters look at values and either remove them, replace them, or block them if something seems dangerous. Let's take a look. Go to the attribute breakout with escaping example below. First off, if you look at the URL, you'll see that there is a hash and the word beautiful at the end. Start off by inspecting the beautiful hearts to see what's going on the page. In the h1 elements that you inspected, it contains a class attribute containing title and the word beautiful again. So now we're going to click the toggle button and see what happens. Now if you look at the URL, you'll see that the hash changed from beautiful to disgusting. Also inspecting the h1 element again shows that the beautiful class has been changed as well. Okay, that's enough of this. Let's toggle back to the hearts. You already know attackers can put malicious data inside inputs, but URLs can be controlled as well because it's simple enough just to change a part of it and send a link to a victim. Let's try this out now. Replace the word beautiful in the URL with the attribute breakout payload. We'll have a quote, a right angle bracket, then enter a script tag, alert, close script tag, and then we'll hit enter and see what happens. Something's broken, so inspect the page to see what's going on. Down in the H1 element, you can see that we haven't broken out of the class attribute. So first of all, we have to solve this before moving on because we can't do anything else until we get this right. The way things look right now, it seems impossible because our double quote didn't break out of the double quoted attribute. But you're being lied to right now. The inspector will always show attributes in double quotes even when that's not the case. So let's try putting in a single quote instead. Replace the double quote in your payload with a single quote. The page is still broken, but we can inspect to see if that worked. The single quote did work, but the next problem is that the less than and greater than characters are being HTML escaped, and the word script is being filtered and replaced. In other words, injecting a script element will be impossible. So instead of scripts, you might want to try href or source attributes using JavaScript URLs, but I can tell you right now that that's not going to work because H1 elements don't pull content from another web page. So you are going to need something better. The ingredients for this recipe are events, event handlers, HTML attributes, HTML tags, and JavaScript functions. Events are the actions that take place within the browser, like clicks and key presses, and event handlers are a way to run JavaScript code when these happen and can be set using HTML attributes, which you already know how to do. The attribute name is just the word on followed by the event name, like on click or on mouse over. And its value is just the JavaScript code you want to run, like your favorite function, alert. Go back to the example and modify your payload by replacing everything after the single quote with an event handler to call an alert. I'm going to use on click equals alert. And if you remember, we broke out of the attribute by using a single quote, so that means there's going to be an extra single quote at the end. So we're going to need to insert that right before the alert. So our event handler is properly quoted. And hit enter. Wait a sec, there's nothing to click. Now, sometimes attackers need to take a step back in order to make the web page appear normal before adding in their exploit. In this case, you're going to need to add either the beautiful or disgusting class in order to make this event handler work. So right before the single quote, add in either beautiful or disgusting to fix the web page. The element is back, so now let's trigger the event handler. As with JavaScript URLs, this attack requires user interaction on the page. And for XSS, attackers usually want their payload to execute as quickly as possible. But we're going to learn how to fine-tune event handlers for exploits in a later recipe. Question: what would happen if every instance of the word JavaScript colon, on something equals, or alert were being filtered out by the website? This is where creativity and persistence win. Take JavaScript URLs for instance. Go to the JavaScript URLs with filtering example below. What happens when you try adding a normal JavaScript URL to trigger an alert? You can see that JavaScript colon is being removed entirely. Since the normal JavaScript URL is being filtered out, let's try being creative and mixing up capitalization, like taking a big S or taking a big P and wait, that doesn't sound right. Taking a capital S or taking a capital P, sticking them in the middle of the word JavaScript, and maybe it'll work to bypass the filter, but your browser would treat it just the same. Are you feeling creative yet? New lines, add them in. Tabs, those work too. spaces. Nope, those don't work. But that's okay, because when you're exploring the limits of what's possible, you'll run into dead ends often. But if you don't give up, you'll learn and accomplish more than you could ever imagine. Oh yeah, by the way, if you run out of creativity, you can just search the internet for XSS filter evasion and just take what somebody else has already done. So now you can see why it's so difficult to protect against XSS attacks, and especially why custom filtering alone is not a good way to protect your beautiful website. It's time to be evil. This next recipe is all about fine-tuning event handlers for exploits. Hello world, I'm Jesse from Chef Secure. This course would not be complete unless you understood exploit techniques, because then you wouldn't truly understand XSS and how dangerous it can be. As software professionals, you need to understand how cybercriminals can attack your applications in order to protect your users and your company. And there is no better way to learn than by doing. So this is where you get to jump into the mind of an attacker. The ingredients for this recipe are CSS events, event handlers, HTML attributes, JavaScript functions, URL encoding, and pure evil. There are two key principles that make up a high-quality XSS exploit. First, your payload must execute as quickly as possible. This means you need to eliminate or minimize user interaction. Second, the attack needs to remain undetected. If you make too much noise, someone will know something's wrong and the vulnerability will be fixed before your exploit can do much damage. And using event handlers for exploits requires a bit more finesse. Consider a tiny little element at the very bottom of a web page. It's naturally pretty safe from click events because the user probably won't even scroll down far enough to even see it. See this in the exploit with event handlers example below. I want to give you some time to find the vulnerability, so take as long as you need. As I hinted at earlier, there's something at the very bottom of the web page where it says share this page. So inspect the element, and you can see there's a data URL attribute that's being set to the current URL. This is what's vulnerable. What you need to do is add your payload to the URL. You can do this by adding a hash followed by a double quote to break out of the attribute, then onClick equals quote alert. And anytime you click the element, the alert will pop up. We already know that onClick probably isn't the best choice. So my favorite combination is to use onMouseOver along with adding some style. Now I know some of you are thinking,
hey, dummy, if a teeny tiny element at the bottom of the page won't get clicked, an onMouseOver event won't work either.
But this is where the magic of CSS styling comes in. You can use the style attribute to add CSS styles to an element to change its appearance on the web page. Quick rundown: create CSS style declarations using a property name, a colon, then its value, with each separated by a semicolon and optional white space. Craft the attack using an onMouseOver event with an alert. Add the onMouseOver equals, and I'm just going to leave it unquoted, alert. Then we're going to need a space for our next attribute, which is style, equals. The first thing we want to do with the CSS is move the element from the very bottom of the page to the very top. By default, elements are positioned based on where they appear in the HTML. But if we change the CSS property position to fixed, then a semicolon, we can fix the element to a certain spot in the browser window. We want that spot to be at the very top, so set the top property to 0, then a semicolon, and we want it to start at the very beginning of the page, so set left to 0 as well, and hit enter. The positioning is perfect, but it's still too small to ensure a successful exploit, so let's just make it larger. First, we need to increase the width. So guess what CSS property does that?
Width.
Yes, width. So we're going to set width to, and we want it to fill the entire page, so let's set it to 100%. Hold on, certain characters in URLs have special meaning. The percent character and semicolon are just two of them. This means that in order for your browser to send the URL properly, you need to URL encode these characters. This is done by adding a percent symbol followed by the character's hex value. So in your payload, percent becomes %25 because 25 is the hex value of the percent character. So let's change the 100% to 100% 25. And since our payload is in the URL hash rather than a query parameter, we can just leave semicolons alone for now. Now that we have the width, next we want the height. And so we'll set height to 100% 25. The element now covers the entire page, and you can see it executes very easily. Almost too easily. So we've achieved our first goal of optimizing execution. Now we want to achieve our next goal of making it virtually undetectable. The first step is very easy. We just need to hide the text by setting its color to transparent. Visually, everything looks normal as if we were just starting, but the HTML of the page still needs to be cleaned up because it contains our exploit code. In other words, the onMouseOver and style attributes need to be removed. And if you recall, JavaScript lets you control everything on the web page, so just do it in your event handler code. So right before you alert, you just need to add code that removes itself. Now in JavaScript event handlers, you can use the word this to refer to the same element. So since we just need to remove attributes, use this.remove attribute onMouseOver. Just like in CSS declarations, JavaScript expressions can be separated with semicolons. So after you remove the first attribute, add a semicolon, then remove the other. This.remove attribute style. After that, we have a semicolon, then our alert. And hit enter. We trigger the alert, and it only happens once. And if we scroll all the way to the bottom, the share this page is back where it belongs. Your attack is now self-deleting and removes all traces of itself from the web page. So the second goal of XSS is now achieved. Here's a recap of what happened from start to finish. You broke out of the data URL attribute with a quote. You modified the element style to secretly fill the entire web page. Listened for the mouseover event to hide all traces of your attack. And finally launched an alert function in place of a malicious exploit. Beautiful and evil. Check out the next example, XSS with progress events, below. This looks a lot like the example from the first recipe, so let's just try injecting a script element. Script, alert, close script, update. It stripped out our script tag, so we can't add a script element. For this example, let's get perfect immediate execution. So don't use onMouseOver or onClick because they require user interaction. Since we can't inject script tags, JavaScript URLs and progress events can give us perfect immediate execution. I'll show you how. Iframes with the source attribute set to JavaScript URL will give you immediate execution. Iframe source equals JavaScript :alert, close iframe. JavaScript URLs won't work with every element that uses source attributes like images, but you can still use progress events to get your code to run. One common payload is to use images with an invalid source and then use the onError event handler set to alert. So img src equals, and then anything that won't work, you can use like a number or just a letter X. And then onError equals alert, and then update. Now with these perfect immediate execution payloads, there's still the problem of hiding the attack. If you just add CSS to hide the elements, that only solves 50% of the problem. You still have the code inside the HTML of the page. So why not destroy the element entirely? To do this, just get the element and then call remove. So in our image example, before we call alert within our event handler, you can just add this.remove, then semicolon. You can see the alert executed and the image is gone, leaving no traces behind on the web page or in the HTML. Automatic self-destructing payloads make them much more difficult to find. And we're going to go over how to create real XSS exploits in a later recipe. But right now, you have hands-on experience showing you how a tiny little XSS security flaw can grow into a much bigger problem by an attacker who has enough skill, patience, and
evil.
I must warn you again, the information in the videos can get you in a world of trouble fast. So where are you actually going to use it? Maybe it's best I don't know. But pro level access gives you challenges where it's completely safe and legal to use these skills. You want to be a hacker, right? Gotta tell you, hands-on experience is the only way to fly. Less than 1% of people ever make it this far, so I understand if that's not you, but if it is, and you want to achieve that mastery for yourself in this lifetime, the link below is where it's at. Okay, as we jump back to the video, pay close attention to what makes hacking work, because next time I'm here, it's going to be wildly different than anything you've seen before, okay? I'll leave the teasing at that, so really make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. Super important, alright? Mystery Jesse is out of here. Let's go back to Bearded Wizard Jesse and continue with the XSS course.
Yep, we're in JavaScript. Hey. Hello world, I'm Jesse from Chef Secure. Injecting into HTML isn't the only place XSS can occur because sometimes JavaScript code can be vulnerable as well. So you're going to need to understand where and how cybercriminals can launch their attacks from within JavaScript. Now if you'll excuse me. The ingredients for this recipe are JavaScript arrays, comments, functions, numbers, strings, objects, operators, and template literals. Attacking XSS vulnerabilities in JavaScript requires you to be extra careful in maintaining proper syntax so you don't cause any errors that'll stop your code from running. In HTML, you can often leave extra angle brackets and tags hanging around, but JavaScript is way more picky and will complain at everything. Strings are likely the most common place you'll find XSS vulnerabilities in JavaScript, and you already know that single quotes and double quotes can be used to make strings, but backticks can be used in much the same way as well. The only difference with using backticks to create strings is that they can contain more code inside them by using a $sign and curly brackets containing an expression. From an attacker's point of view, this means that you don't necessarily have to break out of a template literal to inject code. All you need to do is surround your code with a $sign and curly brackets. But if you want to break out like a normal string, you can still do that as well. And remember, since we're inside JavaScript, all the code has to be valid because if you introduce an error, then your attack's not going to work. One way to break out properly is to surround your payload with the right quotes or backticks, then just add plus or minus characters in between the original string, your payload, and the final string you just created, and you now have perfectly valid JavaScript. Strings are usually assigned directly to variables, but that's not always the case. Here are 3 other areas you might find strings in JavaScript. Number 1, function arguments. You're already quite familiar with functions already, but they can have multiple arguments, each separated with a comma, and it's within these arguments that a vulnerable string can live. For instance, open up a new console in your browser. It doesn't matter where you are. You can call the function console.log with multiple arguments like console.log 1, string, and it will log 1 and the string to your console. Number 2, array elements. Similarly, arrays can be created using square brackets containing comma separated elements, which can also be vulnerable strings. Back in the console, you can type square bracket 1, string, close square bracket. And you see that you created an array. The first element is the number 1, and the second element is the string. Number 3, object properties and values. Objects in JavaScript are collections of properties and their values. The usual syntax is you have curly brackets surrounding a property name, a colon, then a value, and each property definition is separated with a comma. Now you can have vulnerable strings and property names, but it's more common to find them in values. So in the console, you can set a variable test equals curly bracket, number, :1, then a comma, then name, colon, and then string. Close the curly bracket, and you see you've just created an object with 2 properties. The first one is number with its value of 1, and the second is name with the value of string. As an attacker, in each of these situations, your string injection remains the same. In the console, type in a set of single quotes for an empty string. This is where you're going to be injecting. So type in your alert payload, alert in parentheses, and then the next step is to surround the alert with the right quotes. So we're going to surround the alert with another set of single quotes. And then we're going to add the plus characters in between each part. Right here, and then hit enter, and there was an alert in the browser. However, let's say the plus and minus characters were being filtered out. What do you do then? You are going to need to write some JavaScript, and practically speaking, it doesn't really matter what you do as long as you don't cause an error. For instance, go back to console.log. Type in console.log. 1 is the first argument, and the second argument is string. So the string is what you're attacking, and you already know you need to break out and alert. So go ahead and do that right now. Replace string with your payload, alert, and surround it with single quotes. Since we're not going to use plus and minus characters, let's just turn this part into 3 new arguments by separating each part with a comma. So have a comma in between the first empty string and alert, and then another comma in between the alert and the final empty string. Hit enter, and you see that the alert was again triggered in the browser. Since JavaScript allows you to pass as many arguments as you want to a function, there aren't any errors here. You can also do something similar for arrays and objects as well. Another piece of JavaScript you're going to need to know are comments. Comments allow developers to add notes or documentation within code without interfering with the functionality. To comment out a single line, just add 2 forward slashes. For cybercriminals, comments can be used to take out pieces of code to make attacking it easier. For instance, when injecting into a string like before, instead of adding an empty string after your alert, you can just comment out everything that's left over. Multiple lines can be commented out as well, starting with a forward slash and asterisk, and then ending the opposite way with an asterisk and forward slash. Additionally, statements can be ended early by using semicolons. Let's try this out now. Open the JavaScript injection example for this recipe below. Okay, so we need to enter username. I'm gonna type in Jesse, that's me. Click update. That username is taken. How about Jesse116? I don't want to be Jesse116. Cancel. The username is taken. How about Jesse114? Okay. Sounds good. Hi, Jesse114. Okay, we need to see how this is working. Right click and inspect the page. There are 2 scripts at the bottom, so let's start with the first one. Starting off first, there's a function input updated. Afterward, you can see the update button registers this function as its click handler. So let's look at the details. First off, there's a script variable set to the element with the ID dynamic script. Next, there's a comment showing that the next line simply deletes the script if it exists. Afterward, a new script gets created to replace the old one with the same ID. Then its contents are set with inner HTML using a template literal. Inside the template literal, there's a random number function, then an input variable set to the value of your input. Then this gets used to create a name suggestion variable by simply adding a random number at the end. Until the user accepts the name suggestion, a new one will be generated. Finally, the name gets added as the text content of the element with the username ID. This entire script is then added to the web page with document.body.appendChild. If you don't see it yet, take a moment to find out where the vulnerability is and how you might attack it. The answer lies within the dynamic script that gets generated. Your input gets injected directly inside the input string without any protections. So now's the perfect chance to use the string breakout attack I talked about earlier. See if you can do that without my help. So like I said earlier, write your alert, then surround it with single quotes to break out of the string. Then you can add pluses in between each part so there aren't any errors. Click the update button and you'll see your alert. Now since it didn't error, the page is still going to run its code, so the undefined value that gets returned from the alert will be used for the name suggestion. Similarly, you can also replace the last plus sign with a semicolon and your payload will still work. And so will a comment. And so will minus signs instead of plus signs. Hold up, you're an experienced attacker now. You can do better than undefined and NaN values. I want you to write a payload so that you can call your alert but still return a name that can be used for the name suggestion. Easy mode is you have a name and it contains undefined, but hard mode is you only have a name. One final note is that your browser will parse HTML before running JavaScript. So if you're injecting inside a script element on the page, but you can't break out of the string, don't give up because you can still have XSS. You can do this by closing the current script element with a closing script tag within the string. Then adding a new script tag will allow you to inject a new script. Now this doesn't work in this example because the script is being added dynamically, but you'll have a challenge for this later. Overall, the JavaScript context requires a bit more finesse when attacking compared to HTML. But the vulnerabilities are still just as dangerous. And as you've seen, JavaScript will require its own special escaping, but we'll go over that in another recipe. For now, it's important to know the various pieces that make up JavaScript so you know where vulnerabilities can live and how they can be used to attack users and possibly steal their delicious cookies. The events are using percentage browsers that contain because 25 and handlers by using a dollar sign and semicolon becomes percent. Hello world, I'm Jesse from Chef Secure and this is an XSS Polyglot. It's a single XSS payload that works in multiple contexts, and in fact, it works to attack every recipe example we've covered thus far. Polyglots can save you lots of time when looking for vulnerabilities when you don't have access to the code, or if you have a scanner doing the work for you while you do more important, difficult things. The ingredients for this recipe are events, event handlers, HTML elements, JavaScript comments, functions, strings, operators, and regular expressions, URL encoding, URL schemes, witchcraft, and wizardry. No, wait a sec, there is no magic in here. If I had shown you this polyglot before you knew what you now know, it would just be a confusing mess of code that somehow magically worked. But after everything you've learned so far, no, you still have no idea what the heck's going on, do you? But at least you had the knowledge given a particular context to figure out how the polyglot works to launch an attack. The key is just to know what the context requires to work normally and what's required to break out and deliver an XSS payload. Let's look a little closer, starting off with the regular old HTML content injection. We know there needs to be an opening tag in order to launch an attack, so let's just scan the polyglot until we find one. No, wait, that's a closing tag. Nope, another closing tag. Darn it. Here we go. We're now opening an iframe element. As a side note, a / can be used after a tag name in place of a space character, which is helpful for bypassing filters. Moving on, next we have an event handler onload equals alert, which you're already familiar with, followed by 2 slashes that work as a JavaScript comment after the alert, then the tag is closed. So overall, you know that the onload progress event handler is how this attack will work, and everything else you don't really care about because it's not relevant to the execution of this payload, and the browser is automatically going to insert a closing iframe tag. Let's see this in action right now. Go to the XSS Polyglots example for this recipe below. You see that the polyglot is already set as the inputs value, so make sure there's no escaping and select the HTML context, then click the button to inject the polyglot. After the alert, right-click and inspect the text at the bottom that the polyglot injected. You see that after the text, the iframe with the onload event handler is what triggered the alert as expected. So as promised, there is no magic going on here. Now let's move on and scan the polyglot again for the URL context. Up front, we already see the JavaScript scheme is being used with mixed capitalization to bypass filters. Also, since we know we're in a JavaScript URL, everything else is going to be treated as JavaScript. Next, a block comment is being opened, so let's just jump to where it closes so that we can get to the actual part of the code that gets run. After this comment, there are parentheses surrounding code, which works as a grouping operator like in math to set precedence. In other words, everything inside the parentheses gets run first. The grouping operator here works, but it's pretty useless because there's no code on the outside to run. The real purpose is for another context, which we'll go over in a little bit. Next, there's another block comment, and then finally a variable named onClick set to the alert call. And this is where the attack executes. Afterward, there are just 2 slashes which comment out the rest of the polyglot. So let's run this in the example now, setting the escaping to HTML, the context to URL, then click the Inject Polyglot button, and you'll see at the bottom there's a link that says URL. Click that, and an alert will execute exactly as we discussed. Feel free to pause right now if you want to try this without escaping. Since it's a polyglot, you're going to see that you still get execution, but it's going to be different because it's escaping out of the href attribute. Now, as promised, let's go over those mysterious parentheses from earlier. In the URL context, the parentheses inside the JavaScript scheme worked as an unnecessary grouping operator. However, if you are injecting inside a JavaScript regular expression, then those parentheses are important. First off, regular expressions are used to find patterns within strings. They start an in with a /, and the pattern is contained inside. So for the polyglot, this means it needs to first break out of the regular expression using a /. So let's scan the polyglot so we can find that. It's right here. Then afterward, there's an asterisk for multiplication, followed by a minus, which becomes a negative sign since we're already multiplying. Then we have block comments, followed by the grouping operator with the same variable and alert call from earlier. Now, I'm no mathematician, but where I come from, multiplication and minuses, they're used for numbers. But we all know JavaScript is very special, so it created a value called NaN, or not a number, which allows you to do math operations on things that aren't numbers. So this isn't going to throw any errors. Let's try this out now in the example using HTML escaping in the JavaScript regular expression context, then click the Inject Polyglot button. There is an alert, so if you inspect the injection at the bottom, and look at the script containing the regular expression, again, it works exactly as we discussed. I've got a question. What happens when we take out those parentheses? Change the payload to remove the parentheses, and let's try this again. No alert this time. So open the console and look at the error message. The assignment to the alert fails in errors because there isn't a valid variable name. Instead, everything to the left of the equal sign is being used rather than just on click. So those parentheses were important after all. Now finally, in the JavaScript string context, those parentheses work as a function call that actually does produce an error, but the polyglot still gets the alert to execute because the alert as an argument gets evaluated first. But I'll let you check that out on your own if you'd like. This is very good practice, by the way, in case the worst case scenario happens where your site is being actively exploited. Attackers are not going to make it easy on you to figure out their code, yet you need to understand what the heck's going on so you can fix the issue as quickly as possible. So if you ever come across a crazy looking payload like this, don't worry. All you need to do is understand where it might be injected, then simply go through it piece by piece, and then you can figure out exactly how it works so, like me, you can ruin the magic for everyone.
This is the Polyglot Limitations Challenge. Now, polyglots, while great, aren't perfect. Sometimes input restrictions or filters can render them completely ineffective, allowing vulnerabilities to sneak by while attackers sneak in. Our goal here is to trim the polyglot so the alert function gets called when injected. We can drag these sliders to select which part of the polyglot gets injected. The filters are removing left parenthesis, right parenthesis, less than and greater than characters, and the output is in the script element below. So now just onClick was injected. So I'm going to right click and inspect the page, check out the script element, and we have function K, and it just logs it. We have page number. Oh, this is onClick. This is the polyglot where it gets injected. And we call the K function, and page number is this. Let's check out the full polyglot to see what we can work with. Now, as we covered in the recipe, we need to know what context we're injecting into. We are right now inside a JavaScript context. This is our injection. We can verify this by changing the payload up. Let's just call it Javas. Click that, and we'll go down here, right click and inspect. Expand the script area, and there it is. We verified we are indeed in the JavaScript context. And if you click on the console tab over here, you're going to see there is an error here. Javas is not defined. This is where we are, and this is the polyglot we're working with. Remember, this JavaScript colon, this is a JavaScript scheme. This helps us when attacking URLs. We're not in the URL context though. We're in JavaScript context. So let's cut this out. We don't care about it. Next is JavaScript block comments. We don't want to comment. We only have a few characters to work with. While this may work in this context, we do not have enough characters for this to be useful. Because 7 characters long in here, it's just a comment. It doesn't make any sense. There's no alert being called, nothing like that. Now we can continue going on like this, step by step, methodically and analyzing it. A very, very boring, tedious, but scientific way. Or we can be less boring, less scientific, and be more intuitive. Let's see what we need. We need to call the alert function, right? We know that. So let's just find where there's an alert in here. I can see one right here, and I can see one right here. There are 2 alerts in here. How are we going to do this? We can try either one. Let's try the one on the end. Let's cut it down to alert. I can only have 7 characters, so let's try this. All right, right here, alert and open and close parentheses. That looks like it might work. Try inject. All right, it didn't work. Right click, inspect. And let's check out why it didn't work. Oh, that's right. The filter is removing the left and right parentheses. So we cannot just call alert directly like that. It's not going to run. If we know that these characters are useless, we can cut them out and see what we have to work with. In this one, we have D equals alert, which doesn't seem like it does anything in this context. Page number equals D equals alert, and then it calls a K function. That doesn't make any sense. So let's check out the other alert that we saw earlier. And it's over here. Now remember, the parentheses get filtered out, so let's remove them. Let's see what else is over here. Okay, 7 characters. K equals alert. Will that be useful to us? This will set page number equals K equals alert, and then call the K function with this page number. Now, what did I just say? K equals alert. So if we call the K function, we are therefore calling the alert function because K equals alert. You can do that in JavaScript. Even though we define the function K here, we can override it with our code right here just because we have the power of JavaScript. So that is the awesome thing about cross-site scripting is when you can inject code into the page, you have complete control to do anything you want, overwrite the page, and alert to your heart's content. Let's try this out. Let's inject this right here. You can see right here, we got the alert to run and it's successful. And fantastic, you passed this challenge by fixing the polyglot to work within the limitations. So let's move on to the next recipe.
Right now, try calling the alert function. So type in alert, it's alert, the alert function, alert, an alert, alert, the alert, alert, or alert, an alert, alert. Okay, I think it's safe to say you're all masters of alerting now. So I want you to write real grown-up XSS exploits now. You know the kind that can get you jail time if you use them or you shouldn't.
Guys, we've got a problem. YouTube rules have a loophole for educational and scientific content, which is hacking, of course. Hence all the disclaimers saying so. And that's why I've been able to get this course out to you so far. However, this next recipe on exploits is far too insane to qualify for an exception. See, look here. Hardcore hacking. Oh, no, up a little bit. Instructions on how to use computers to compromise personal data. Now, while the goal is still educational and scientific, going beyond the alert and writing real exploits kind of falls in that no-no square, so I gotta cut this one out. If you want to watch it, it'll still be free in its entirety on chefsecure.com, but that's the only way I can get it to you without getting this whole course taken down. The link's in the description when you're ready. It's a whole lot of fun. But anyway, let's get back to the video, this time looking at XSS from the friendly defender's point of view, which is totally not against the rules.
Hello world, I'm Jesse from Chef Secure, and you're finally going to learn how to properly fix XSS vulnerabilities in your code. Here goes. Don't trust user input. That's all. It's not that simple. For instance, consider a select box on a sign-up form. All the values are defined by you on a server you trust, and you never ask the user to input anything, but the submitted value can still be modified to deliver an XSS payload. Or how about referrer URLs or API calls that happen in the background of your application with Ajax? Or how about, instead of thinking what is or isn't user input, just don't trust requests entirely? This can save you beyond XSS too, like if you receive a request to delete an account, for instance. This can potentially come from anyone, so you're going to need some defenses. So this recipe is all about setting up defenses to protect yourself from XSS attacks. The ingredients for this recipe are CSS, HTML elements, JavaScript regular expressions, strings and template literals, JSON, URL encoding, and URL schemes. The key to defending against XSS is the same as attacking it. Know where the values are inserted. For XSS, there are 7 contexts you need to know. First, the most common 2 contexts, HTML content and HTML attributes, are usually bundled together under the same escaping. You already know as an attacker you're often looking to use special characters to break out of something and inject your own code. And to stop this, you need to make sure these special characters aren't used in a way that can modify the web page. You do this with escaping. In short, escaping replaces each special character with a safe alternative. Here are the special characters for HTML and how to escape them. Starting off, ampersand becomes ampersand AMP semicolon. Then to prevent tag injection, you need to escape angle brackets. So less than becomes ampersand LT semicolon. Greater than becomes ampersand GT semicolon. And to protect attributes, you need to escape double quote with ampersand QUOT semicolon and single quote with ampersand hash X27 semicolon. By the way, 27 is just the hex value of the single quote in ASCII. You might see the decimal value used instead, like ampersand hash 39 semicolon, but it works exactly the same. And that's all you need. Hold on, we're not done yet. Remember, attributes can be unquoted as well, so we need to take care of space characters too. Using hex values again, space becomes ampersand hash X20 semicolon, new line becomes ampersand hash X0A semicolon, carriage return becomes ampersand hash X0D semicolon, tab becomes ampersand hash X09 semicolon, and form feed becomes ampersand hash X0C semicolon. Even if you personally never ever use unquoted attributes and never will in your life, which is good, I like you. The fact is someone else might. And any of those space characters can be used to break out and deliver an XSS payload. By the way, many frameworks with built-in escaping don't account for unquoted or single quoted attributes by default, so you may need to add that in if you want extra protection. And if you're using a framework that doesn't have automatic escaping, you should really put in the effort to 1, finding a way to enable it, or 2, finding a better framework, because it'll be well worth it for the security of your app in the long run. And always remember, automatic escaping doesn't guarantee you're 100% safe from XSS attacks, because they may not always be context specific, like in URLs. Also, there are built-in methods to turn off automatic escaping when developers need it, which can unintentionally introduce new XSS vulnerabilities. The third context you need to know lives inside some HTML attributes, and that's URLs. If you're working with a full URL, then you need to ensure that valid schemes like HTTP and HTTPS are used. You could use a regular expression to check this, but you need to make certain that the string actually starts with the valid scheme. Remember, whitelisting, where you compare against what you do want, is always better than blacklisting, where you compare against what you don't, because this ensures that nothing unexpected passes through. Sometimes you'll be using untrusted data in only part of the URL, like in URL parameters. And this requires you to use URL encoding or percent encoding to make sure the data stays where it belongs, and attackers can't change the URL unexpectedly, like adding or overriding parameters. As a reminder, URL encoding allows special characters in URLs like percents, ampersands, and semicolons to be used without confusing browsers or servers. It's made using the percent symbol followed by the character's hex value, like %25 for percent, %26 for ampersand, and %3b for semicolon. To make it simple, all characters other than A through Z, capitalized and uncapitalized, 0 through 9, dash, underscore, dot, or tilde should be percent encoded. After you've encoded your URL properly, remember, if you're still inside an HTML attribute like a source or href, HTML escaping is still required. The fourth context is JavaScript, or more specifically JavaScript strings, because you don't really want to put untrusted data anywhere else. For instance, if you need a number assigned to a variable and you do this, without casting the data as an integer on your server like this, you're wide open to XSS attacks because an attacker can just put their JavaScript code directly in there. So instead, when supplying data to a JavaScript variable, just put it in a string first. And if you need a number and don't cast on your server, you can do it with JavaScript's parseInt function or convert it to a number with the number constructor. However, the string is still vulnerable to XSS because we don't have escaping yet. Quotes need to be escaped so attackers can't break out of strings. So double quote becomes backslash double quote, and single quote becomes backslash single quote. And don't forget template literal escaping with backtick becoming backslash backtick, and $sign becoming backslash $sign. Then forward slashes need to be escaped to prevent closing the script tag and injecting a new one, because remember, the HTML parser runs before JavaScript. So forward slash becomes backslash forward slash. And we don't want attackers to escape our own escapes, so backslash becomes backslash backslash. Finally, new lines can break out of strings as well and cause errors in our code, so we also escape carriage returns with backslash R, line feed with backslash N, line separators with backslash U 2028, and paragraph separators with backslash U 2029. What about inline event handlers? They're in both JavaScript and HTML contexts, so what escaping do you use? Since HTML gets parsed by your browser before JavaScript, wrap the untrusted data with JavaScript escaping on the inside and HTML escaping on the outside. Think of it like this. Your browser gets served a web page containing the event handler. From there, the HTML parser eats it up, digests it, poops it out. It's the circle of life, folks. Then JavaScript will come along eventually and eat whatever's left over. So we need to prepare the event handler so it can be consumed by HTML first and then JavaScript in the end. And remember, this is important. Don't put any untrusted data in a place that gets evaluated directly as an expression, such as outside a string or within strings that get evaluated by potentially unsafe functions like eval, the function constructor, set timeout, set interval, or set immediate. Regular expressions make up the fifth escaping context. If you recall, regular expressions are used to find patterns within strings. One use case would be to make a search feature within a web page. Escaping is simple again, just add a backslash before special characters. Now for XSS, all you really need to escape is the forward slash so attackers can't break out of the regular expression. But for completeness, here's a list of all the characters that need to be escaped to prevent other kinds of attacks that can change the meaning of your regular expression. Dot becomes backslash dot, asterisk becomes backslash asterisk, plus becomes backslash plus, question mark becomes backslash question mark, caret becomes backslash caret, $sign becomes backslash $sign, left curly bracket becomes backslash left curly bracket, right curly bracket becomes backslash right curly bracket, left paren becomes backslash left paren, right paren becomes backslash right paren, vertical bar becomes backslash vertical bar, left square bracket becomes backslash left square bracket, right square bracket becomes backslash right square bracket, backslash becomes backslash backslash, and forward slash becomes backslash forward slash. The sixth context to go over is JSON, or JavaScript Object Notation. As the name implies, JSON is a format for JavaScript objects. So you can say, take an object from your server and work with it in your browser. This can go inside event handlers, data attributes, JavaScript variable values within script tags, or directly within their own script tags with the type attribute set to application/JSON. By the way, data attributes and application/JSON scripts are the best place to put your JSON data. You'll see why in a later recipe. Also remember, data attributes are part of the HTML context, so you'll need HTML escaping on top of your JSON escaping. Now, thankfully, due to the JSON format, escaping JSON for XSS is very simple. Really, the biggest threat is breaking out of inline script tags using the old trick of closing a script tag, opening a new one, and then adding the attack payload. Therefore, you could either escape the forward slash with backslash forward slash, or like Rails and PHP do, escape the angle brackets with Unicode where less than becomes backslash U003C, and greater than becomes backslash U003E. Finally, like within JavaScript strings, line separators and paragraph separators can be used to break out and cause errors in your code, so you also escape line separators with backslash U 2028, and paragraph separators with \U 2029. Actual new lines and other control characters are already covered with proper JSON encoding, so there's no need for further escaping. I want to make it very clear. The first step is to create valid JSON using a proper JSON library or module, then do escaping. In other words, don't just use this escaping directly on untrusted input and think it's safe. For instance, if you have a variable in JavaScript equal to an untrusted string that's escaped only for JSON, then trivially an attacker can just add code directly. Tag injections or line and paragraph separators aren't even needed. So again, it's essential that you're working with valid JSON first. And the seventh and last context is CSS. In short, inline styles are also vulnerable to breaking out with the closing tag. The / character is used for escaping in CSS, so escape the escape first with / becoming // then don't allow attackers to close the style tag, so escape / with //. This is technically all you need to prevent XSS because CSS won't run JavaScript. So an attacker's only tactic is to break out of the style tag. Now, historically, CSS has been used in the past to run JavaScript and launch XSS attacks, but good fortune has blessed the world with the death of IE. No, I won't speak ill of the dead. But modern browsers around today keep a clear separation between scripts and styles, so thankfully, XSS from CSS is no longer a problem with up-to-date browsers. There are more escaping rules for CSS like these, but CSS-based attacks, while interesting, are outside the scope of this course. Whatever framework you use, you should have built-in escaping functions, which you should use instead of writing your own. However, you can and probably should add to them, such as escaping space characters and single quotes for HTML attributes. It's important to know exactly how your built-in functions work, so you can also know their limitations. For instance, PHP's HTML special chars function to escape data for HTML contexts doesn't escape single quotes by default, and you have to rely on passing a flag every time. And you can improve situations like these with your own wrapper functions or modules that does the work for you, because someone will forget. So just let your code do the work for you, then you can forget proactively. Hello world, I'm Jesse from Chef Secure, and I'm going to show you how and why you might want to purposely allow users to inject HTML into your website. And I'm not talking about how to create a secret backdoor or an elaborate scheme to steal money from your company that'll get you fired. No, that was the exploit recipe. I'm talking about how to make your site more interactive, dynamic, and exciting by allowing user-supplied images, custom formatting, and super hip marquees. Wow. The ingredients for this recipe are escaping, HTML elements, JavaScript arrays, functions, objects, and strings, JSON, and URLs. Honestly, there's only one thing you really need to know to allow user-supplied HTML into your page. Don't build this yourself. Well, that's about it. No, really, listen carefully. Don't build this yourself. There are so many gotchas and nuances that you really need to use a common module or library to allow user-supplied HTML into your page. Otherwise, you're gonna wind up with a lot of issues and wasting a lot of time building something that really someone else has already done better than you. No offense. HTML sanitizers on your server or in your framework do exactly this. You specify what HTML tags and attributes are allowed, and the sanitizer parses the untrusted input, like a browser would, to produce HTML only using your whitelists while removing or escaping everything else. Notice that I never recommended trying to escape or filter untrusted input as it's being entered in the browser. And this isn't because I'm lazy. This isn't only because I'm lazy. It's because client-side filtering like this can easily be bypassed with the right tools, or by disabling some JavaScript, or by simply making AJAX requests in the console to send unsanitized data. Therefore, all the escaping and sanitization need to happen as the response HTML is being written rather than when the input is received. For your challenges, you're going to use the Sanitize HTML package. Now, this is created for Node, but your own server or framework will have its own version of an HTML sanitizer that should work similarly to this. Let's go through this right now. go to the HTML sanitization example for this recipe below. And we're going to be working in the console again, so open that up. The way to sanitize untrusted input is to call the function sanitize HTML, passing in the untrusted input as the first argument. So we're just going to add a paragraph element for now. P, the contents will be hi. We'll close the paragraph tag. And an object containing the whitelist options will be the second argument. So add curly brackets, and inside the allowed tags property will be an array containing the HTML tags you want to allow. Let's start off with just an empty array to see what happens. Since we didn't allow any tags, sanitize HTML only let the content pass through. But for scripts, styles, and iframes, sanitize HTML will filter everything out. So check with your own sanitizer to see what its default settings are when you need to use it. Go ahead and change the allowed tags array to allow paragraphs by adding the P tag inside. Now you see this time that the entire paragraph element was preserved. But what about attributes? In the console, push the up arrow to retrieve the last command, then add a data-food attribute to the untrusted input string and set it equal to your favorite food. I'm gonna have cookies. Then hit enter. I'm sure it hurts deep down inside your heart when your favorite food gets taken away from you like this, especially if your favorite food is cookies. But there is an important lesson to learn here. Whenever you're adding in new security features, you need to be aware of the full impact that your changes can have on the very, 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 very important business-related features of your application. In other words, carelessly adding, escaping, or sanitization in parts of your application that actually require unescaped HTML can break features that keep your company in business and keep you with a job. Let's go back and fix this tragedy by adding an allowed attributes property to our whitelist. So after the allowed tags, we're going to add a comma, then allowed attributes. And its value is another object containing tag properties with their whitelisted attributes. So add curly brackets, then add the paragraph property P, then an array containing our data-food property inside. Then hit enter and hallelujah, all is right in the world again. For href and source attributes, sanitize HTML by default only allows HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, and mail to URLs to be used. Other sanitizers may do similar, so again, you'll need to double check if yours is different. Let's try it out. In your console, call sanitize HTML with an anchor element that uses a JavaScript URL. So we'll have an A tag, href equals JavaScript :alert. Then click will be the content and close your A tag. And the second argument will be an object containing allowed tags property set to an array containing an A, then a comma, and then we'll have allowed attributes set to an object. Then first we'll have an A tag, followed by an array containing href. Close up the whitelist, then close up the sanitize HTML call, then hit enter. You see that the href attribute was stripped out automatically because it contained the JavaScript URL. Now if you change this to use HTTP or HTTPS, it'll work as expected. Instead of JavaScript alert, we'll change it to https://chefsecure.com. And it works as expected. There are certainly more fine-tuning options available if you need, but this covers the basics of HTML sanitization and is all most websites really need to allow safe HTML code while killing 99.99% of all bad input. What about the 0.01%? Oh, there it is. Bad news, good news time. The bad news, you're probably going to mess up sooner or later and add an XSS vulnerability to your code. The good news, I'm going to show you how to blame other people for it. Hello world, I'm Jesse from Chef Secure, and you need more code reviews. Code reviews are the key to pushing responsibility onto others when you make a mistake. Think about it. If you do something wrong and no one else is involved, all the pressure and blame and shame fall entirely on you. That's a lot to deal with. But if you can get others involved and let them be the ultimate authority in approving your code before release, it's now their fault. Why didn't anyone think of this sooner? The ingredients for this recipe are XSS attacking and escaping contexts. You know how sometimes you're in a rush to write new features as quickly as possible and you don't have the luxury of double checking your code to make sure it's secure? Hate that. And what's worse is when someone finds a vulnerability in your code and they expect you to fix it instead of giving you a bonus for creating new job opportunities. So you gotta put down writing your ultra performant code and pick up some obsolete 2-month-old junk that you don't even remember, draining up to 40% of your productive time according to the American Psychological Association. Not to mention the cost of unexpected interruptions, which is estimated around $650 billion a year by the New York Times. I'm sure you've all been there, so I'm going to help out and show you how to prevent XSS vulnerabilities with code reviews. Code reviews are where you write some code and you have others look at it for bugs, completeness, style, and security vulnerabilities. Once reviewed and all the comments are addressed, the code can move forward in the release cycle. On top of spreading the blame if something goes wrong, it's also a wonderful opportunity for mentorship and learning for everyone involved. Making security discussion part of code review will also reinforce the association between security and coding, so that security becomes an actual part of the coding process rather than just an afterthought. To address XSS in code reviews, you need to ask if there's any untrusted data being delivered in the response. If so, figure out all the contexts involved. It could be HTML content, HTML attributes, URLs, JavaScript strings, JavaScript regular expressions, JSON, CSS, or some other combination of those. Next, determine what escaping needs to be used and if it's performed properly. And remember, you may need multiple layers of escaping in a particular order, like with inline event handlers. If there's no untrusted data, make sure you're not escaping anything that could break the page, such as escaping your own server-defined HTML from a helper method. Frameworks with automatic escaping also have methods to turn off escaping to output raw data. Most of the time, these are used for good reason, again like in helper methods, but the problem lies in the fact that untrusted data can sometimes sneak in. You can also extend your code reviews to existing or legacy code. One way to do this is to set aside time every week or month to go over part of your application and try attacking it. On top of finding potential security vulnerabilities, you can also have a better understanding of the scary old code that everyone's afraid to touch. You can then add one more layer of security by finding an automated code scanner that looks for XSS vulnerabilities. There are many different options for the different frameworks out there, or if you hate them all, then you can at the very least build your own simple script to look for dangerous functions being used in your code. It might take a good deal of work to mark all false positives as safe, but if you stay strong, you can have a very effective tool that will add an extra layer of defense in case a vulnerability slips by. Afterward, in your build process, you can set it up so that whenever someone pushes code, your scanner will run, and if it finds a potential security vulnerability, it will fail the build, requiring the developer to either fix the issue or mark it as safe, which, by the way, is another perfect topic to bring up in a code review. With ongoing communication, both new and experienced developers can learn to be proactive in securing their code as a natural extension of the development process. And most importantly, you have the perfect framework for blaming others for your mistakes. Seriously though, people make mistakes and everyone needs opportunities to learn and grow, no matter how experienced they are. So here's a tip. Don't be an abusive, unlikable jerk. Code reviews are best served with empathy and compassion. Oh, and don't forget the ice cream and cookies. In this recipe, you're going to learn about CSP and SRI for XSS when SHTF. Hello world, I'm Jesse from Chef Secure, and Content Security Policy, or CSP, is a way to protect your website from XSS attacks even when you have a vulnerability. And SRI is a way to stop third-party scripts from causing damage even when the host gets taken over by an attacker and they change the script. Both of these are essential to securing your application in depth, because when something goes wrong or fails, and trust me, that will happen, your application is not left completely vulnerable and open to to attackers. The ingredients for this recipe are cores, CSS, escaping, events, event handlers, hashing, HTML elements, JavaScript functions, strings and template literals, JSON, response headers, URLs, and acronyms. Lots of them. Content security policy works by whitelisting the resources allowed to load on your web page, like scripts and styles. And anything not on that list will be blocked. CSP is set in a response header set by your web server named content-security-policy, or in an HTML meta tag with an HTTP-equiv attribute set to the same value. Your policy whitelist becomes the header value or the content attribute value in the meta tag. This policy defines the valid resources for your web page with directives, which are mostly rules for elements and their allowed sources. Now, normally you start with the default source directive, which is just a fallback in case any other directives go missing. So if you got some trust issues, you can block all resources by specifying none in single quotes. This is by far the most secure option, but if you at least trust yourself and any uploads you may have hosted on your site, you can specify self in single quotes instead. Next, the script source directive is likely the most important part of your CSP when defending against XSS attacks, because it tells your browser exactly what scripts are allowed to run. And if you can block an attacker's script from executing, there's a lot less damage they can do. Since default source is just a fallback for missing directives, your script source needs to list all resources used, even if it's already included in the default source. Most websites need to allow scripts from their own host by using self, and to include third-party scripts like CDNs, list the full host name with or without the scheme. So you can have https://cdn.example.com or cdn.example.com, or even wildcard subdomains like star.example.com. But be extra careful with wildcards because they can match everything. Locking down your script source directive will prevent attackers from pulling scripts from their own servers to deliver something like a crypto miner or a ransomware download. But what about injecting scripts directly into the page? Thankfully, CSP is secure by default and will prevent XSS attacks like this, but it's probably gonna break your web pages too. While it's almost always a bad idea to disable security features, I'll show you how to do it temporarily, so you can get rolling with your own CSP. Then I'll show you the right way to fix your site so you can lock it down properly. Adding unsafe eval as a source allows you to run potentially dangerous JavaScript functions that evaluate strings as code. Again, these functions are eval, the function constructor, set timeout, set interval, and set immediate. Note that the last three functions aren't blocked without unsafe eval if they're called safely using a function argument rather than a string argument. Some of your dependencies, like older JavaScript frameworks, may need unsafe eval to run properly, and if that's the case, be sure and go through your own code and look for any unsafe uses of the eval family of functions. Then you can work on upgrading your framework or dependency so you can eventually remove unsafe eval. The next insecure source option is unsafe inline, which removes most of CSP's XSS defenses. By default, CSP blocks inline scripts from executing, like inline event handlers and script tags containing code. And more than likely, you have both in your code somewhere, so you'll probably want to add unsafe inline as a source. Let's fix this problem so you don't have to do that. Fix your inline event handlers like this. Move untrusted or dynamic data into a new data attribute. Then make a new JavaScript file and put your event handler code inside a new function. And update your code to use the data attribute. Next, add the event listener. And finally, load the JavaScript file in your page. Let's get some hands-on experience with this. Go to the Refactoring Inline Event Handlers example for this recipe below. For this example, you're going to copy the HTML into a new file on your computer. So I'll copy the HTML, then open a new terminal, create a new file called refactor.html, paste in the code, and look at the end of the inline event handler and switch out my name for your own. Then save the file and open it in your browser. You see that once you touch the cookie, sadly it escapes out of your hands and an alert pops up asking you to kindly stop. Go back to the code now. Now within the head of the document, add a meta tag for the CSP with a HTTP-equiv attribute set to content-security-policy, and the content attribute set to default source self in single quotes, and single quotes containing unsafe inline. Refresh the page and you'll see that it's still working. But we want to lock down our script source. So go back to the CSP, and each directive is separated with a semicolon, so add that. Then add the script source, and just add self in single quotes. Refresh the page again, and you'll see that the cookie no longer runs away. This is because the inline event handler is blocked by the CSP, and you can even verify this with the error message in the console. Let's fix this now. Remember, we're considering your name as dynamic data. So the first step is to move it into a new data attribute. So in the span element, add a data-name attribute set to your name. And this, of course, would need to be HTML escaped in your framework. The next step is to make a new JavaScript file. I'll name it cookiesec.js. Then move the event handler into a new function. So define the function with function, then the function name. I'll call it hover handler. Add parentheses and curly brackets. Then paste the inline event handler inside. I'm going to fix up the spacing here really quick. And the next step is to use a data attribute. So change the alert string to a template literal and replace your name with the data attribute using $ and curly brackets containing this.dataset.name. After this, you just need to add the event handler with document.getElementById, pass in the ID cookie, then .addEventListener with mouse over as the first argument, and your function name as the second. Finally, just add the script to the page with script source equals and your file name. I'll have cookiesec.js and close script tag. Save it, refresh the page, and everything is now working again with a lockdown script source. And there are no more errors in the console. By fixing inline event handlers like this, you get 3 bonuses. 1, you reduce complexity by only needing HTML escaping instead of HTML and JavaScript. 2, you properly separate your HTML and JavaScript code for better maintainability. 3, and most importantly, you get to keep the XSS protections that CSP provides. Similar to this, JavaScript URLs are also blocked without unsafe inline, so they just need to be replaced with event handlers. As I said earlier, script tags containing code are also considered unsafe inline scripts. To fix these, move untrusted or dynamic data to a data attribute. Then move your code inside a JavaScript file. Update it to use the data attribute, then load the file from a script tag. Let's do this in the refactoring inline scripts example below. And as I promised in the escaping recipe, I'll show you how to properly handle working with JSON objects. Again, for this example, you're going to copy the HTML into a new file. So I'll copy it. Then I'll create refactor2.html, paste the code inside, and switch out my name in the JSON object with your own. Now let's suppose this JSON object right here is dynamically added to your script in your framework with proper JSON encoding. Save the file and open it in your browser. And you see you get a nice friendly greeting. Now we're going to add the CSP, so open the file and add the meta tag, meta http-equiv equals content-security-policy, and content attribute equals, and we'll just add the script source this time with script source self in single quotes. Refresh the page now and you'll see that you've got an unthoughtful generic greeting that doesn't make you feel good. Open the console again and you'll see that the CSP blocked the inline script. So we've got to fix this now. The first step is to move the JSON object to a new data attribute. We're going to put it on the span element with the ID of name. So data-user equals, then I will cut the JSON object and paste it inside. Now comes escaping. There isn't any JSON escaping to do, so next we need to HTML escape the double quotes by turning them into ampersand QUOT semicolon. Do it for all of them. By the way, in your framework, you'll of course use your own escaping functions instead of doing it manually like this. Now that the JSON data has been relocated, create a new JavaScript file in the same directory. I'll call it friendly.js. And let's set a variable to the span element with let name equals document.get element by ID name. Then update its value with name.text content equals. And now we need to parse the JSON to turn it from a regular old string back to a real JavaScript object using json.parse name.dataset.user. Then finally, from that user object, we need to get the name, so just type in .name. Then remove the contents of the script tag in the HTML file and set its source equal to your file. Mine is friendly.js. Save this. Refresh the page now and you'll see everything is fixed with the personalized greeting, and you've locked down your CSP to prevent unsafe inline scripts from executing. For extra practice, you can pause the video right now and try the other recommendation I gave you in the escaping recipe, which is to use a script tag with the type set to application/JSON instead of using a data attribute. Depending on how many inline scripts you have, this may take a bit of time. So while you work on that, CSP gives you two ways to allow inline script tags without having to break security with unsafe inline. The first is to use a hash. With a SHA-256, 384, or 512 hash of your entire inline script code, you can whitelist inline scripts. Add this as a source in single quotes by adding the SHA algorithm used, followed by a dash, then the base 64 encoded hash value. The second way is to use a nonce, which is short for a number used once. It's basically a random token generated with every response. Every inline script tag will need to set a nonce attribute to this value, and the CSP source will have in single quotes nonce dash, then the nonce value. Look for a library module that does this for you instead of building it out yourself, so you can save time and make sure it's done right. Moving on from scripts, another directive that can use unsafe inline is the style source. If you recall, attackers can use styles to make exploiting a page easier, so by default, CSP blocks inline CSS styles that use a style attribute or style tags. Fixing blocked styles works like this. Move the CSS from style tags into a new file. Afterward, move any style attributes into a new CSS class within the same file. Add this class to the element's class attribute. Then finally, link this file in the head of the document with a link tag containing a rel attribute set to style sheet and an href attribute set to your file. And again, hashes and nonces can be used for inline style tags too. Locking down your default source, script source, and style source will do a lot in limiting XSS attacks on your site, but there are still several other options available for extra security. I'm just gonna vomit them all out to you right now, starting with the ones that fall back to default source. And if you need to dive deeper into any of them, I'll provide you with a link to Mozilla's excellent CSP documentation for reference below. Here we go. Connect source tells your browser what sources scripts can connect to in the background. This affects things like AJAX and fetch requests, beacons, WebSockets, and pings from anchor elements. Font source specifies what font resources can be loaded on your page. Frame source is for embedded iframes. Image source is for images. Manifest source is for the manifest.json file used in progressive web applications. Media source is for audio, video, and track elements. Object source is for object, embed, and applet elements and their nested contexts. Worker source is for workers, shared workers, and service workers. If your CSP doesn't have any of those directives listed, your default source will be used instead. Now let's look at what's not covered by default source. The next two directives are for securing connections. Only one should be set at a time, and they don't have any source list because they're just flags. The first is block all mixed content, which prevents loading resources over HTTP when the page is using HTTPS. The second is upgrade and secure requests, and will automatically upgrade HTTP requests for resources to HTTPS. Here are the last of the remaining directives. Base URI tells your browser what sources are allowed to be used for the base element. The form action directive lists where forms can submit their data. Doesn't sound too exciting, but we'll later go over how to exploit this if it's missing from a CSP. The frame ancestors directive handles the embedding of the page within an iframe, object, embed, or applet element by other web pages. And since this doesn't fall back to default source, missing this directive will allow any site to secretly or not so secretly embed yours, unless you have other protections set like the Xframes options header. Plugin type specifies what MIME types of plugins are allowed for applet, embed, and object elements. And finally, the sandbox directive works in the same way as an iframe sandbox attribute, which essentially restricts several actions on the page. I won't go into these, but if you think you'll need them, feel free to look further into this. And if you do, know that you'll need to use a header for your CSP and it won't work in the meta tag. This should be more than enough to secure your application with CSP, but if you find you need a little more fine tuning, check out the CSP documentation link below. The last defense we'll go over in this recipe is sub-resource integrity. Remember hashing inline scripts for CSP? It's essentially the same thing. Scripts hosted on other sites, especially scripts you just randomly found on GitHub or someone's blog, need to be verified that they do what you think they do and nothing else behind the scenes. Once you trust what you're putting in your website and delivering to every one of your users, SRI will help make sure it doesn't change unexpectedly. The SHA-SUM or OpenSSL commands can help you generate this hash, and then you'll need to encode it in base64. But Mozilla again came to the rescue and made it easier by creating an online service for this. I like easy. Open the link below or go to srihash.org. You see, all you have to do is enter a URL for the resource you want to use and it'll generate a hash for you. So we're going to use Bootstrap CDN as an example. So go to bootstrapcdn.com as well. Select the complete JavaScript link. It's copied to the clipboard. Now go back to the SRI hash generator. Paste in the link and click on hash. You see that it generates a script with the integrity attribute and its value set to the algorithm, a dash, then the encoded hash. In addition, a cross-origin attribute is set to anonymous, which prevents your browser from sending any credentials to Bootstrap CDN, while SRI performs its background fetch request to verify the integrity of the hash. Now, there are two cases where you can't use SRI for scripts. The first is fixable. Your CDN doesn't have CORS enabled, so SRI can't verify the integrity from your website. To fix this, you simply need to add the CORS headers in your CDN so the script integrity can be verified. The second situation, unfortunately, is not fixable. If you're referencing a JavaScript resource that's constantly updated with new features and fixes, any new change will break the integrity of the hash. Your script will probably look something like this. From here, you have two options. You can either use SRI and wait for your site to break with every update, or just leave it off. Always remember that user experience in security is very important. Security should enhance applications and not just break them, but ultimately it's up to you and your team to decide what risks you're willing to take. However, this doesn't mean you can use this as an excuse when you just want to be lazy and procrastinate, because there's a lot of upfront work involved. Just so you know. Hello world, I'm Jesse from Chef Secure. XSS attacks are largely defeated by content security policy, but if proper escaping isn't used, then attackers can still do some serious damage. So once again, we're gonna look at things from an attacker's point of view and see how evil we can be. The ingredients for this recipe are CSP, CSS, HTML comments, HTML elements, JavaScript functions, and URLs. As a reminder, unsafe inline in your script source opens you up to most XSS attacks, and so does having HTTP or HTTPS protocols or the wildcard, because they all match any website on the internet. So having any of these in your script sources pretty much defeats the purpose of your CSP protections for XSS. Also, whitelisting generic CDN domains where attackers can upload their own scripts. opens you up to XSS as well. So you need to be very specific as to what you allow in your script sources. But in this recipe, we're going over HTML injection attacks, so there won't be any JavaScript involved. Consider the form action directive, which specifies where forms can submit their data. If this is missing or it's not locked down to your own controlled domains, attackers can use forms to steal data. Remember the challenge where you stole login information? You can make an attack very similar, only this time
I broke the rules again, guys. But instead of cutting this out entirely, let's change it up so I'm not giving instructions as a hacker, but instead, my ultra-friendly and rule-following Defender AI is gonna talk to you and tell you all about what's going on.
I've stopped those bad guys from injecting JavaScript, but we're still getting hacked and we're seeing random forms where they don't belong. I really don't know what's going on because this is just so bizarre. A lot of our pages just ask the user to log in when they're not supposed to. Oh. There's another problem. All of our other content is gone, like vanished, completely. I can't see it anymore. After inspecting the page, sometimes I see an HTML comment, when our code doesn't even have comments in it. I don't get it. I don't get it one bit. Another thing is, we stopped getting form submissions. I don't know where they're going. It's like they're being completely hijacked and sent somewhere else, but I don't know where.
Another thing, without the base URI directive set,
OMG, I found this super weird base element on my website. I've never seen it before. It's definitely not my code. Anyway, more form data is missing again. It's like every form I have where I don't type out the full website name doesn't work anymore. I don't know where that data is going.
And guess where relative URLs are commonly found? Yep, forms. This will be your third challenge. Let's talk about images now. You already know that images can't run JavaScript, even with a JavaScript URL. So if image sources aren't locked down in a CSP, how dangerous can it be? Take a look at this payload. What can it do? When you're ready to find out, go to the example for this recipe below. Oh, it's called stealing with images. That's your first clue. More of a spoiler, really. Now you can't use Chrome for this example, but Firefox works just fine. In the example, you see a search form at the top, and at the bottom, there's a support form that's filled out with personal information. First off, try out the basic script injection with open script tag, alert, close script tag. Then click search. Nothing happens, so let's look in the console to see what's going on. And the content security policy has blocked the script from running. In the inspector window, you can open the head of the document and see the meta tag containing the CSP has a default source of self, the script source of self and a nonce, then finally a wildcard image source. So it looks locked down pretty well.
Oh no, oh no no no, oh heavens no, it's happening again. We're getting data stolen by evil bad hackers. After analyzing the website, all I see is a failed image loading on the page. I'm using a CSP, so I don't know why we're getting hacked. I got my degree on YouTube University, so I should be highly skilled at this. Anyway, doing forensics on the image, I see it's using a single quote for the source. I don't know why. I only use double quotes in my code. Anyway, the URL always points to an HTTPS host controlled by hackers. See, look at my webpage. Everything's gone except that weird failed image. I really hope to fix this. Anyway, I looked at the network tab and to my surprise, the missing web page data gets sent in the image URL. See? Look. This is all from my website. It should not be sent to hackers. I need better defenses. I wonder why the hackers only want to put the image at the top of the page and not the bottom. I also wonder why the hackers forgot to close the single quote. They must not be very smart.
Hey, this is important. The single quote was used because attributes are normally double quoted, so it eats up everything that gets in its way until it finds a matching single quote. In this example, the matching single quote was in the Textarea's placeholder that said, I can't find ... Without a matching single quote, however, the attack would fail and the browser would just ignore the image.
Look at this random data log emailed to me.
So in my log file, you'll see there's a GET request containing all the information. And if we look at this parameters value, it shows all the information in plain text.
including the name, the phone number, and the address. There are still other attacks that can be performed, even simple social engineering attacks that only have text, asking a user to send private information to the attacker. But the point here is that your CSP should be locked down as tightly as possible, and even then, it's essential to understand that content security policy is not a replacement for coding securely with proper escaping.
It's finally over,
Jesse.
You lost. Yeah, and now you can take that stupid beard off.
Do you hear that? That's your alert. What do you do if your alert pops up but you can't see it? You could be missing out on finding important XSS vulnerabilities. A lot more. This is blind XSS. The ingredients for this recipe are HTML, JavaScript, and ancient alien technology. Hello world, I'm Jesse from Chef Secure. The secret to finding blind XSS vulnerabilities is using an ancient alien technology called probes.
Hello. I suppose you want to probe me. Well, might as well get it over with.
Not that kind, but these kinds of probes. In most cases, you can see whether a web page is vulnerable to XSS by injecting a payload that alerts you. But what if your payload gets triggered somewhere else on the site where you don't have access, like an admin page, or even a completely different site that just uses the same data that's stored in the database, like your username? Or even worse, what if a developer releases an entirely new feature, your alert pops up for them, but it's just ignored like it's no big deal, just another bug to completely ignore? This is a problem. It's called blind XSS, where you're essentially injecting into a web page where you have no direct way of seeing whether or not your attack executed. That is, unless you inject probes that report back to you every single time they run. If you don't know how exactly to do that, perfect. I already created XSS probes for you, along with a monitoring dashboard, so you can uncover the hidden XSS vulnerabilities for blind XSS. With the probe script, our goal is simply to report back whenever it gets executed, without stealing any user information or doing anything malicious or potentially illegal. Because you don't do those kinds of things, right? Right? Let's first dive deep into the technicals and look at the code that makes up the XSS probes to see exactly how it works before we practice using it. To start off, we wrap everything inside an IIFE, or immediately invoked function expression. Basically, a function that runs automatically. This is a fancy way to isolate the probe so that when it gets injected, it runs immediately and doesn't interfere with any other JavaScript code on the web page. Next, we set the XSS event URL variable to report back to the Chef Secure website so it shows up on your dashboard when it runs. After that, we create the send request function that handles sending the request. This request is what contains all the probe data sent back to your dashboard. The next few lines create the background request. We could use the more modern fetch API, but older browsers don't support fetch. So while our probe uses more ancient technology, it's much more reliable for our purposes since we have no idea where our probe will end up. So it's best to use what's most guaranteed to work. Whether using fetch or this, the request gets sent silently in the background without interfering with the web page or ever being seen. We can see that after creating our request object, we're posting our data to the XSS event URL in JSON format, which, as a reminder, is just an easy way to send JavaScript data. And the data we're sending is this. Type is our probe. The token is your unique token that connects this data back to your personal dashboard, followed by the injection URL, which lets you see the URL of the web page where your probe was injected. Finally, when injected, this function gets called to send the request and perform all the work. So let's see this in action now. Click the link below to open your XSS probe dashboard, and in separate tabs, open the 2 examples as well so you can follow along. So here we are on the XSS probes dashboard. You see we have a script probe and an image probe, 0 total events so far, 0 users reached, and 0 unique injections for now. If you scroll to the bottom of the page, you're going to see why probes are valuable, how they relate to blind XSS. So you can read that if you want, but we're going to take action now and go to the script probe on the left. There's a little bit of information on the bottom, but what we're going to do is mouse over the script tag probe and then click it to copy it. It's copied. So we're going to go to the first example now, the script injection. This may look familiar. It's from the first recipe. Before we inject it, I'm going to right click and inspect, then select the network tab so we can see what happens in the background when we inject this. So I'm going to paste it in, click update. You see there's nothing changed on the web page. So whatever's going on in the background is completely silent that the user doesn't see. There's no alert popping up. And so there are 2 requests that happen in the background. The first one is to retrieve the probe. And this is the probe code that we went over already. So let's go to the second request now. And this contains all the information that we went over before. So there's the injection URL, the IP address, there is the user agent, and some additional information to our dashboard. So go back to the dashboard. Now you see we have an event. There's 1 total event now, 1 user reached, and 1 unique injection. The script probe has found something, and so it says the injection URL right here. And then if we click on user details and expand that, you can see there's the IP address and the user agent. Excellent so far. Go to the second example and try it again. Because as you know, there are sometimes filters involved. Right click and inspect the page, select the network tab. Now paste it in and click update. Now you see there's something going on this web page, so it doesn't appear that it worked. There's nothing in the network tab right now. So if I right click and inspect the script that I tried to inject, we're seeing that the script tags were filtered out. So our script probe isn't going to work. So we need a way to bypass this filter. And so this goes back to the other recipes before, filter bypassing. We know that script tags are often flagged as malicious. XSS filters look at values and either remove them, replace them, or block them if something seems dangerous. You know, a lot of websites know that if somebody tries to inject a script tag, they're usually up to no good. So we're going to try to inject an image instead. So we're going to image probe, click that code, and it's going to copy to the clipboard. All right, so it's copied after clicking it. Then paste it in, click update, and that's good news. We see that an image tried to load. So let's double check. All right, you see the source is set, and let's go to the network tab, and you see that it succeeded. Go back to the dashboard now, and you see we now have 2 unique injections, 2 total events, and still 1 user reach because it's just you doing it to yourself. And so now we see that the image probe does have an event. The injection URL isn't complete like it was with the script probe. And this is because we don't have the full power of JavaScript when injecting an image. You could try using event handlers to get some more JavaScript in there, but the goal right now is just to find a possibility of injecting some code in the web page. And so this was another success. So compare the pros and cons of each and see how you can use both of them to find more blind XSS vulnerabilities. Now, if you want to clear the events, I encountered an error. Whoops. I'm going to fix that. If you encounter that too when trying to clear your events, just refresh the dashboard page, try again, and it should work as expected. So not only can these probes help find blind XSS vulnerabilities, they can also be used as a form of automated XSS testing for new and updated features. For example, if you can set the value of your username to the full probe script and it doesn't filter anything out, then even if it doesn't execute on your profile page because it's properly escaped by the developers, anywhere else your username shows up on the website has a chance, maybe a small chance, of automatically triggering your probe and reporting back to your dashboard. So think of the many, many different ways you can launch probes all across websites. For example, direct messages usernames, form values, URL parameters, and so on. You can really just try anything that has a chance of showing up somewhere else on the website or any website. So remember, if you want to see what may be hidden in the vast digital unknown, do as the aliens do and probe away, my friends. Probe away.
That's the end of the Ultimate XSS Mastery course. If you had fun, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment. But remember, like I said in the intro, this entire journey, from the basics of script injections to the layers upon layers of advanced techniques, all the technicals, the bits, bytes, and rules of XSS, this is just the beginning. If you are really able to absorb each subtle detail of elite expertise, you'll truly understand that hacking at its core is about human creativity breaking through barriers to set you free, an essential skill you're going to need. Because where we're going next isn't another digital playground. This is real life.